So we're going to look at how to read the chart, first of all, and then we are going to look at the structure, and we're going to look at some of the language that is useful to use in these types of answers, okay? Before we do that, we're just going to check that everybody has the right idea about the task one, because sometimes there is a bit of confusion about what to include, okay? So I've got some true-false sentences here. Just let me know in the chat if you think that it is true or false, okay? So task one, academic, your main purpose is description. Yes, absolutely. That is true. Okay. And it's an important point. You are only describing what you see. Okay. You are only describing it, nothing else. Okay. In terms of the types of charts, you can have a line graph, a pie chart, a bar chart, or a table. Okay. Or you can have a combination of two of those. So you might have a line graph and then you might have a pie chart, okay? Today we're going to look at a bar chart, all right? So it could be a diagram, it could be a chart, it could be a map. Okay, yes, again, very true. So there are a range of different things you can be asked in the academic task one. So, you know, you need to have done practice in all of those different areas, okay? And we do have webinars on maps and processes and things like that, okay? So your minimum word count is 200. Okay, yes, very good. Yes, exactly. It's 150 is the minimum word count. There is no maximum word count, but you know, you don't really need to write much more than 150 words, okay? It's certainly not better to write more words, but you know, 160, 170, 180, perfectly fine. Okay, don't think that you have to write more than that, okay? And yes, Lena, in the task 2, the minimum is 250 for the essay, okay? Okay, about 30 minutes for the task 1. Yes, very good. Yes, so you do get the 2 tasks together, so you do have 1 hour for both of them. But the recommendation is to spend about 20 minutes on the first task and about 40 minutes on the second task, because you know the second task is more complicated and it is worth more marks. So you know you really want to have that 40 minutes for the task 2. Okay, all right. No, Osama, you can't add anything. You can only describe. We're actually coming to that now. So you should interpret the data. You should give social background or no, exactly, okay? There's no interpretation, there's no opinion, there's no analysis. It's purely description, okay? Oh, I'm sorry. You can, I think you can move me, okay, if I'm covering it up, yeah, okay. But it is quite scary. You should give a personal opinion. Okay, very good. So again, interpretation, opinion, not part of the task 1. Okay. There should be a section where you summarize the main features. Yes, this is extremely important, okay? And also making comparisons is extremely important. So part of your description, not just reporting the information, but also comparing it where it makes sense to compare it, okay? All right, so that is correct. And you should write a conclusion. Ooh, this is always the tricky one. Okay, good. I'm glad there's more people saying false. You don't need to write a conclusion in the task one. If you want to, you can write sort of one line at the end, which is a conclusion, which is just a really general summary. But you're not really writing a conclusion, because a conclusion is your opinion. And you're not giving an opinion, you're not analyzing, you're not interpreting. So there is no conclusion. A conclusion would be an interpretation of the data. So yes, if you want to write one really general summary at the end, that's fine, but don't analyze or interpret the data. Okay. The comparison is just saying, you know, this number is larger than this one. It's a descriptive comparison. It's not interpreting, okay? But it's using comparative language. Okay, so let's move on. So this is the complex chart which we are going to work on today. So we're going to have a look at it, and then we're going to write a model answer together, okay? So just kind of take a moment to have a look at that. And that is the task title. So you remember, you always get a title for your task. So you really need to spend a couple of minutes at the beginning just checking it out and making sure that you understand what's going on, okay? It's very easy to make a mistake in terms of the measurements or the figures. So just take a couple of minutes, in the same way that before you write your task 2, you're going to plan the content of your essay. You also need to just look at it. So don't start writing straight away. Just pause and just check that you understand what you are looking at, okay? So there's kind of some questions that you can answer, okay? So generally speaking, what's the topic of this chart, of this bar chart? What are we looking at? Okay, exactly, Anshal, employment rates, okay? Rates of employment. Yes, Yin Yin, a lot of people do. It's a very common mistake. So in this case, what are the units? Yes, it's the units of measurement. Yes, it's percentage, okay? So all of your figures are going to be percentages, okay? Do check that very carefully, because sometimes there's almost like an assumption that it's percentages, when sometimes it could be thousands or millions. So check that very, very carefully, okay? So the reason why we call this a complex chart is that we're comparing different things here, okay? So what are some of the different things that we are comparing? Yeah, very good. So first of all, we're comparing male and female. What else are we comparing? Yeah, then we're comparing 6 different countries, okay? And we're comparing 2 different years, okay? So when you get that kind of complex information, it can make your answer a bit complicated. So you've got to think about how you're going to organize your answer so it's going to make sense, okay? And we will look at that in a moment, okay? And as we've already said, there are 2 different years, 1995 and 2005. So there is a change over the time. So we are going to be using that kind of vocabulary that we use with the line graph, things like rose, decreased, that type of vocabulary, okay? And as we said, we've got the 2 time periods. So thinking about those 2 time periods, what tense are we going to use most often? Yes, past tenses, simple past probably most often. Probably you could use some past perfect there as well. But mainly you're going to be using the past tense, the past, the simple past, okay? And make sure you're consistent with your tenses, okay? Another very common mistake that people make is they change from present tense to past tense, back to present, back to past, and that's quite confusing. So it's a good idea to always check after you finish writing, are all my tenses right? Are they all consistent? Okay. The change over time means it's from 1995 to 2005. So there's a time period that we're talking about. Okay. Sorry, Milad, I'm not quite sure. You say 55% instead. Oh, do you mean if it's not exactly accurate? Is that what you mean, Milad? It doesn't matter if it's not absolutely accurate, okay? But you can, yeah, so what's a good thing to use is approximate language, okay? So you can say roughly 55%, you know, around 80%, and that gets you out of the issue of whether it's absolutely accurate or not. But yeah, exactly, Jen. Yeah, so use that approximate language because that's good language anyway. And it's the kind of thing that they are looking for. Yes, a ruler would be helpful, or a finger. Yes, exactly, that kind of language. And it also adds more words. So, you know, if you're feeling like your word count's a bit on the short side, you know, you can add in some approximate language and that gives you a little bit more, okay? So those are the kinds of things that you need to check before you start writing, okay? What are the different categories? What are the measurements? What's the overall topic? Is there a time period or is it just comparison, okay? Is it past? Or in some cases, they have charts which are projections into the future. So, you know, in that case, you need to pay particular attention to that, and you need to make sure that you're using the right vocabulary to show that it's a forecast for the future, okay? So let's have a look at this now. So the other thing that you need to think about is the key features, okay? So remember, your overview is very important, and your overview is going to be a summary of the key features. So it's worth just highlighting that or making a note of that, you know, before you start. Not too many, as we said here, kind of 2 or 3 is probably a good idea. If you have more than that, then to be honest, it's detail, it's not main features, okay? So what are the key things, if you just look at that chart, what stands out, okay? So we're gonna have a look at that a bit more, okay? So, and your overview is always your key features, okay? So key features, what is the data doing generally speaking, okay? Yeah, only the chart matters, Milad. You don't make any predictions, any analysis, anything like that. Yeah, okay. So we're gonna look at that in some more detail. So what are we looking at in terms of data? So we've got a time period here. So what's our general trend in terms of the time period? Okay, exactly. So males in every case are higher than the females, pretty much every case, yeah, okay? So that's a definite overall pattern there, that's a definite key feature, okay? So what are, and it's always going up, yes, it's always increasing, okay? Yes, so it's a similar trend for the 2 years. We're always increasing between Australia, between 1995 and 2005. Okay, another thing that you want to pick out is anything that's particularly higher than everything else or particularly lower. Yes, so we've got an 84% there that's standing out quite a lot. We do have, you know, lower figures, but there's nothing that's really standing out, I would say, in terms of the low figures. Okay. Any big differences between the countries? Would you say there are any major, really clear major differences between those 6 countries? No, I mean, there's not a huge difference, exactly, and there's not a huge difference. So we can't say that this country was, you know, much higher employment than all of the others. So that's not really something we need to think about. But there are a lot of similarities. We've already talked about the similarities in terms of the male and female population. Okay, so well, we're going to come to that in a moment, Shirin. Okay, yeah, and it's always good if you can divide the body into 2 parts. So in a moment, we're going to look at the best way of doing that. Okay. But here is a summary, I think, of the main features. So the figures for men are always higher, okay? There's always an increase between 1995 and 2005. And, you know, we can also say that there isn't a clear pattern. That can be part of your overview, okay? So if there's nothing which really stands out, you can just say that there is a great variation here, okay? So that's enough. That's your key features. I think anything more than that, you're starting to go into detail, okay? So it does have to really be very, very general, the overview, okay? And very clear patterns.